And good morning, and thank you so much for coming. Hello, Barbara Koppel. So glad to have you. It's so nice to be back here at White Feather Farm. It's such a beautiful farm. On your way in, I hope that you saw the open farm out there, the farm stand. They have all this great organic produce. So maybe on your way out, get some of them. It's really good. I want to thank Dan Gallant, who runs the White Feather Farm, and Sarah Johnson, who owns the whole place, for having us every year. It's such a wonderful trait to be in such a beautiful place. The festival, this is the day before last. We have been running already since Wednesday evening, and we'll go strong until Sunday night. So please, along with panels, which I hope you'll come back to more and more. We have 4 of them today here at White Feather Farm. But we're also showing a lot of great movies throughout town. So please come back and join us at the movies, at the panels, at the parties, at the award ceremony. We would love to see you. This panel is a special one. You are going to be hearing from our honoree. Debra Granik is our fiercely independent honoree. And when she speaks with our moderator, Thelma Adams, who's a novelist and a critic and a film journalist, and has known Debra for quite some time, you will hear why Debra is getting this year's award, because she really is truly fiercely independent and truly one of the most respected and talented filmmakers that we have here today. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Debra Granik and Thelma Adams on stage.
The room is filled with fiercely independent. This is the conundrum of this title, fiercely independent. It's that we're fiercely interdependent. Yeah, and that you can't be fiercely independent unless people come before you who are fiercely independent. You build on the shoulders of giants like Barbara.
Yeah,
you know,
everything's great.
and I'm seeing Ed, who went way fierce, 60 miles north there. So. We've got a lot of fiercely independent people in the room.
We do?
Yeah.
My goodness. Where do we start? I can say Janet Grillo, Barbara, Jerry, Nicole, Sarah. We have a lot of, and who came up that's in the back?
From Newburgh? Edward Crawford.
Hi, Edward Crawford up from Newburgh. Nice. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So here we are, we who can get up at 10 o'clock because we didn't stay up till 4.
Or they did, and they still made it.
Yeah, you go, hangover. So we're gonna start. I love Debra Granik, always have. The first year I came here, we gave an award to Down to the Bone, and Vera Farmiga picked it up. I am just going to do, we all know what she's done, but she, Down to the Bone, Vera Farmiga, Winter's Bone, Jennifer Lawrence, and Dale Dickey, and John Hawkes, is that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Leave No Trace, Thomasin McKenzie, and Ben Foster, who's wonderful always, and then the documentary Stray Dog. So that's your past, and we could sit here and talk about the past, but I think that the juicy part would be talking about initially what you're doing now, and also we're going to talk for an hour and then we'll take questions. And given the people who make up this audience, answers too, because this is going back and forth, this dialogue. So you were saying that now what you're working on is a 3-part.
No.
Oh.
More than 3. Because it's longitudinal, so it was filmed since 2014. So it doesn't fit well into 3 parts. Luckily, it's was conceived of maybe as 5 parts, then the pandemic happened, and then it grew to maybe 7 parts. So,
and the subject
the
is
subject
it's longitudinal.
is, yes, longitudinal of life after incarceration in New York State, and how people rebuild life after incarceration, which, as we are so all versed in, our country practices in such a wide, over-policing, over-carceral way. And people in New York actually, in some ways, fare quite well. Incarceration was very heavy because of our drug laws and because of what happened with sweeps and the demographics of how the pipeline worked from certain neighborhoods downstate to the prisons and also rural communities up here. But the actual interesting slant that's slightly optimistic is New York has innovated also. It's not the poster child of where reentry needs to go by any means,
Right.
but there are people who've provided an array, people who've formed activism and ways to get voices really into the dialogue. So there's,
And we have
some
to,
very
and we
good
have to
positive.
remember, I don't know how aware people are, one of the biggest industries of this area is incarceration. Prisonburg? Guards, yeah.
Well, just that that was a distinct policy in the United States, was to create small, minor booms in some disinvested locations in any state. There's always a downstate and an upstate in any state in the United States. And so it was considered almost like, I want to say, a stimulus package for the United States. And a lot of the archival footage, you don't need to be left or right. It doesn't matter. The archival footage shows the stimulus package in play. It shows the dozers in every state, and it shows the price tag rising. It doesn't matter if it's California or Utah, down south, the Northeast, it does not matter. There will always be this footage, this abundance of footage that shows the dozers coming and creating this brand new, spanking new, state-of-the-art prison that goes over budget usually by a magnitude of, approximately about 50 million. But now that's actually in the billions now, right? But, so it's, there are trade shows. The prison industrial complex, just really ran away with us. No civilian can imagine, right, that what this looks like in terms of just deep profiteering off of incarceration and off of misery, off of punishment. However, the film that I'm working on is utterly personal in the sense that we have, luckily, our valiant primary participant, he took himself to some of these shows, like a trade show.
When you say your valiant primary participant, what do you mean?
He's the person that we made access, we made contact with first. His name is Cos Marte, and he was in the first stages of reentry, and he spoke I was trying to do research, where would I go in New York to get my first understanding of what some of the reentry looks like live.
Right.
What do some of these programs look like? What is a soft skills class? How does someone build their resume after prison? And
Well, while they're in prison, like how they get the skill set, and then
that's the dream. What you just mentioned is the dream, that people would garner a skill set while inside and get a chance to work on that and hone it so that they were viable when they leave.
Right.
That's just happening again. It was happening actually a couple decades ago.
Right.
It got eviscerated, for a lot of different reasons. But so he was
because they're not the actions that are being taken are not based on what's best for the prisoner. Definitely not. I mean, obvious statement, and I know I was talking about it this week because in California, where they have these horrible increasing forest fires, yet more disaster, they take people out of prison to help the firefighters, and they give them a training course, but they don't make a bridge so that when they get out of prison, they can become firefighters, which are desperately needed.
Yeah. So that would be
An example.
an example of a great decision to make a pathway to employment. Yeah, that would. Yesterday at the festival, there was a really wonderful film actually speaking about New York State and carceral practices, a film about a theater program that has actually had significant traction in, I guess I would say, mid-state prisons. I don't know how far north they go. And it was a beautiful film to behold. It was about the transformative results from. Okay, yeah, and I know Sing Sing is an active participant, and I don't know about Attica, but I know that they named quite a few prisons. So that's an example, of that kind of programming actually did exist for a moment, and there was, and definitely, before, I don't know what it was like exactly before Attica, but there was a really big push for recouping some of the losses that happened from being poor. There was this understanding that great thrust of what lands people in prison comes directly from the experience of poverty.
And also then that part that is cash bail, that people who get picked up who don't have money anyway, that's the problem, they don't have money, and then they get arrested, and then in order to get out of prison, there's money that they have to present, and then there's fines, and then it just kind of, once it happens, once you're hooked.
It started operating as a poorhouse. It became Dickensian, right? It was like, our carceral convulsions, they go in many different ways. The theme is endless. The amount of books that have been written in the last 15 years, there were these seminal books that ended up being textbooks, right? The new Jim Crow, and the discussion's been alive, and it was extremely alive before Trump. There was a year, it may be just photos only, but there was a year when Pope Francis went in the prison for the first, went into Philadelphia prison. Obama went into a federal penitentiary. This was, the discussion was that ripe and that percolating, that it was worth everybody's time to keep it central. People were putting a priority on it, and that really dissipated as we swung around politically. But this film, the thing I was trying to actually
get to.
I railroad myself a lot. Was that we took this approach that it was going to be worthwhile to follow a few people so that they could actually narrate for us. I don't mean in the sense of just narration like voiceover. I mean, even call me and say, Debra, you might be interested. Today I'm actually getting off parole. Of course, I'd be like, I need lead time. Department of Community Supervision does not usually let anybody shoot anything,
Right.
And I don't have a news pass, so it's like I spent 3 years, writing to Rikers to see if I could film. He was doing a program in Rikers, so it's very hard to get access inside. So the project that I was working on, that I've been working on, had to really take place. That I am working on, has to take place with what the guys and women involved in the film, the lead participants, what they want to share, what they lead me to. It doesn't. There's no content except maybe 3 scenes inside, because it's not about their life inside. There's no salacious content. No one's committing any crimes. There's no flashbacks to things that got them jammed up. So there I am, toiling on this thing, and it's very perfectly non-commercial. And simultaneous to working on this, the streaming monopoly is rising to this pinnacle.
So you're doing your fiercely independent thing. You've picked your topic based on your passion. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then, of course, being all fiercely independent, I'm like, there will be no salacious content, Okay, so and so that's in a time when the idea that at 10 minutes, it would be in your interest, filmmaker, at 10 minutes for this to occur, because our small committee
So these
says that
this is
the algorithm
corporate
tells you, the corporate,
or Netflix
exactly,
or whoever it is.
yeah, some group of C-suite, and there are not that many of them now, right? Because it's such a monopoly, right?
Yeah.
There's like 5 or 6.
The pyramid is going like
Yeah.
this.
So it's going to be, it's actually maybe emboldening. It was like getting a vitamin B injection to come to this festival, right?
Right.
And like hear these words, and then go out and try to see how hard we can stand our ground to say that, American lives can be interesting without a great downfall, or if they've got a pretty severe downfall, it's all about how someone very honestly and rawly gets back up. But they don't have to do, we don't have to see grisly things. We don't have to be shocked that surviving is suspenseful in the United States. It's not a given. For many people, right, there is no security net. There is no cushion.
Right.
The end of the month comes, and your bed is above your stove in Hell's Kitchen, and you're a working actor, and that's a very non-negotiable deadline. Do you jump that turnstile or not? That's suspense. If you've got a criminal record, do you jump a turnstile? That's
right.
But yet you got this job, and you've got to get there. I wish I could make a film just about the suspense of deciding whether to jump a turnstile or not. Because
That's a great.
because it's a super intense set of decisions. So much
With
at stake. It's
ramifications,
so high
yeah.
stake. High
Whereas
stakes, yeah.
when I was a kid, my Brooklyn-born father would just push me under the turnstile, like his hand on my head, and that was that. Which is a little different.
Right, because there was no surveillance camera to like.
No,
Right.
not then.
Yeah.
There was a box camera.
Yeah. So that is what I'm working on, and it's there are days where it's just a trail of tears, where we're on the 80th time, Rubik's Cube. Everyone who's been in the editing room knows that there are many, many ways to configure any story, and documentary or nonfiction or the art of nonfiction is no exception. It's not about perjuring timeframes. It's more like, it's of course what you include, what you don't include. It's whether you decide to start a story where someone tells you some contextual content about their life, and then put a little intertitle that says like 3 years earlier, or whether you're going to go strictly with only what you can learn as you go. And Barbara will appreciate this enormously, I believe. The term
Barbara Koppel.
Yes, Barbara Koppel. Yeah, I think
The
first and last
Oscar-winning
names.
documentary filmmaker.
Yes, yeah.
And dearest person in the world.
And
Not that I'm biased.
and the human being that set the tone for the female-bodied human being, for the born into a female body filmmaker, standing there in the rain or in the 20 degrees or in far-flung states, booming.
Gunshots flying, yeah.
Yeah. But the term verite is this contested term that we've, this discussion has been it's decades old. And, all filmmakers who work in any form of nonfiction recognize that verite is in some ways a spirit, right? It's a spirit of how much could you observe, and how much can the story, the people, places, and things that are in front that you're trying to document, how much of the story can they tell in their own words, in their own actions? It still requires huge organization and editing, and the film I'm working on practices both, right? There's a lot of the story is told in a scene where someone says, I'm really nervous tonight. I need to pitch in front of people who have money who might want to help a carceral project. What shoes should I wear?
Right.
And you realize, that he wants to look good. He doesn't have a big budget for any purchase of new shoes. He has a choice between, you get a lot from the scene that
Right.
you understand about the life. But then there are other scenes where it's not just verite, where either I've tremendously prompted, like I missed something. you know, they laugh. I work with a group of people now who really get me, right? As a filmmaker, I have a lot of compassion. They know that I miss a lot, right? That right before I walked in their kitchen, they had just gone over the playbook of what they're going to, you know, I'm like, you know, I have to say, you guys, I'm having a small death right here. You have to. Is it possible that you just review that? Can you review that again?
Can you do that again? Yeah.
And you know, half the time it doesn't work because the first time was the most beautiful, you know. And if you didn't have the lav on, or you got lousy sound, or you forgot to unplug the refrigerator, you know, that first version isn't going to go well for your editing process.
Right.
So you try, you know, so maybe you can cobble together the first take and the second take. So, you know, so it's a mixed practice, and that's another situation that we're facing. I think many of us appreciate that the lenses for documentary got beautiful, and you were using primes and zoom. You know, you were shooting on film initially, and there was the Handycam era. I came of age in the Handycam. The films were all butt ugly, right? They were truly gritty, and the particulate quality of video was pretty gnarly looking, and then the prime lenses came back, right? Even with the small cameras, the small video cameras, so films can be shot in a 50mm lens with soft backgrounds and gorgeousness, and fireworks can always be out of focus, and this, you know, so you start reading articles that say, this is getting to the point of fiercely independent again. Just so
you know what? I just love. I'm sorry. We all love listening to you talk, and I'll prompt you when you if you wander off.
And we'll make sure that people's questions and thoughts in the room, you know, have space here.
Right.
But so films got doc and nonfiction got really beautiful, which is a plus, right?
Right.
But then when you get too beautiful, then the mandate becomes that they should only be beautiful. Well, there are times when you still have to run and gun. There are times when you're on the road and it is low light, and your gain will be up, and your film, and it will look ugly no matter what kind of DI you go through, what kind of post-production you go through. There are times when you're shooting under fluorescent, and usually, and for docs, fluorescent is frequently great because it is one of the lightings of life, you know, and it's unforgiving, and it is what it is. But there's times when it won't go well for what you're recording, but you still need that scene. And then there was this mandate that the score should be huge, and the score should be very magnificent and maybe overwhelming, and even do what it's supposed to do in a more Hollywood sense of dictating, guiding, prompting, telling you. And
ooh, I
so
hate
then,
that.
So then, you know,
right?
You're fiercely, well, you know.
Okay, I'm just gonna answer. Why do I hate it? Because I think I'm mature enough to know my emotional response to the real material. I don't need someone poking me. Right. Other people may need to know that it's a cry moment. I usually know it's a cry moment because I'm crying.
Well, I think what you're saying is scores that can give some space, right?
Yeah.
Scores that can allow for that breathability and cognitive effort.
Right.
We get pleasure. All of us get pleasure from putting pieces together. It's one of the things our brains are designed to do, and one of the pressures that we fight, I believe, in the industry is the idea of the fear that the American will not understand something for about 12 to 15 or 70 seconds, and they will melt. You know,
right.
It's such a disservice to our American civilization that we don't have the capacity to make leaps. You know, I have to say, even to this day, in a European context, and I don't want to compare us, or I think cross-pollination is a beautiful thing, you know, and I think that when you have more cultural subsidy in another realm, such as Europe, there's some things to be looked at and to be gleaned and understood. And one of them is, lo and behold, the idea that audiences can handle more.
Which they can.
Which they can, and which people like, and which actually lights up. You know, it's the same metaphor as any stimulus, right? You know, the film where you piece more together is more like cocaine, actually. You know, the lobes of your brain actually light up when you make connections.
Right.
And, you know, so I'm just saying that, you know, It's not, the metaphor only stops there, just about lobes.
Yeah, really, just an idea,
But
just a thought.
But so that we are up against something special here. So I think for us to kind of have a huddle up, for filmmakers to huddle up, and film appreciators and film curators, programmers, commissioners, people who commission projects, to huddle up and say, how do we keep some of this independence going? Because it's not always fiscally the top line, right? It doesn't guarantee. It guarantees biodiversity. It doesn't guarantee greatest profit. It doesn't guarantee, but biodiversity. We used to believe in niche markets. Think of all the art house that we, at this festival, want to see thrive and that we appreciated through the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? We believe in niche markets.
Well, isn't the Woodstock Film Festival a niche market?
Absolutely. But it's a niche market that tries to then be also a seeding ground, right?
Right.
Young filmmakers, and now that it qualifies for shorts, it's doing it in spades. This festival is now, I feel, I don't know if Maya would agree with me, but I feel like it's actually doing something on the cultivation level to say, come hither with your shorts. This is a qualifying festival. It means that your films can be considered to actually go really far into the national discourse, into the national realm. But you're giving these shots, these injections of inspiration and encouragement to emerging filmmakers.
Right, and also with Nicole, they're going now into the high schools.
Yes, yeah.
And doing training. And also with Mary Stuart Masterson and Stockade Works, they're trying to make it possible for local people to get the basic skills. People who cannot afford Tisch or Columbia, which is now, I found out this week, $80,000 a year to be a filmmaker. It boggled my mind.
And DCTV just got a new infusion of baptism, right? They've got this, the first New York State, possibly national, cinema dedicated to documentary only. It is a gorgeous state-of-the-art cinema that or movie house
in New York.
In
Is
New York.
This the one, the Firehouse?
This is in the Firehouse. This is in downtown in DCTV, the Firehouse that's been there since 1972 or 71, and it's across from the Tombs. It's across from the Manhattan Detention Center, and it's in Chinatown. And it now has this cinema that can program. It's been programming for years, but now it can program with this gorgeous sound, a really good screen, and this is like against the grain. Talk about, that cinema is like a documentary that was made over 30 years,
Right.
Cobbled together from these small micro fundraisers, a few cool grants, year after year, saying it was on the horizon, and then made it through the pandemic somehow.
Amazing.
And was baptized last week and open and ready for business. And so I think there are quite a few signs of hope. I like to look for all of them, every single one.
I'm a little curious, and we'll talk about this, the documentary, but you've moved back and forth between documentary and fiction film.
Yes.
So obviously right now you're excited by doing documentary or nonfiction or whatever you would want to call it. Is it because you found this project, this longitudinal project, and you were just so passionate about this story? Or I know that you often you have a number of projects and you have to go with the project that gets funded.
Right, or the one you can do during the pandemic.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So this project actually, in the sort of earlier years of this project, I did veer off and I did leave no trace in the 2017, 2018 time, a long time ago now.
Leave No Trace is the Ben Foster, Thomas and Mackenzie, where he's a Vietnam vet. Is it Vietnam or is it, no, it's...
Sand Wars. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Wars. And he and his daughter are living in the Pacific Northwest in the forest and as survivalists.
On public land.
Yeah, on public land, but they're thriving in a certain way.
And the film is all about that certain way, and its strengths and its vulnerabilities, and the film is really about what does it take to think your own thoughts, and where does that lead you, and what do we think? What does someone who needs to deviate from conformity think? How do we understand that decision? So it was a rich philosophical piece, very thorough.
Right.
It actually was in a lineage of really interesting American thought about nonconformity and nonconforming families and nonconforming lifestyles. How little do you need to get by? It's sort of a convergence between Thoreau and hillbilly thinking, authentic hillbilly survival thinking.
Right.
Not survivalist, but survival.
Right.
Or even the incorporation of primitive skills. What do I know as a human being, and how much could I take that to live in a non-commodity based existence?
Did anybody see Triangle of Sadness here? Because isn't that in the end, when they're on the island, it's like who has the skills that really matter, as opposed when they're when they're on the big yacht, and obviously the people who have the most money are calling the tune, and then when the yacht gets upended and some of them get swept away onto an island, the whole hierarchy turns. Great.
Didn't Lena Wertmüller do something along?
She did Swept Away.
Yeah.
Didn't Madonna redo it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean. Yes. That and understanding someone who, understanding that people care very profoundly for each other, and there's a lot of ands to that. That love has a lot of ands because it becomes. There are imperatives sometimes that bring people in different directions, though they have that love. But you asked about the segue or the swinging between fiction, the different degrees of nonfiction and fiction on this long continuum. And I was so happy that when I finally realized, it's a good day when you realize sort of how your brain was wired, because it's very hard to figure that out for years,
Yeah.
And so I realized, okay, I'm a social realist. There was a reason why I liked Dickens for from whatever, from adolescence on, and I have trouble really conjuring things out of nothing. So back in the day, did a short
world building kind of.
Yeah. So exactly, I get very big charge from hearing someone tell me something they've lived that I don't know about. And I was in film school and came up here to do a project, and the project was a documentary assignment. So I had found this little inn through a different experience, just through an actual travel experience to the Hudson region, and the inn was kind of a haunted house. I didn't realize that, but the two innkeepers were a little bit spooky and eccentric, and they said, if you hear chains at night, don't be scared,
Thanks.
Found out that the house actually had been a set for the Amityville Horror. And the day that I came up with my tiny little crew, my little film school crew.
And this is from Tisch?
Yeah, this is from Tisch, and Barbara was a beloved guest professor that would fly in when she wasn't
Janet
working.
Tisch, right?
And
No?
And the
But now.
yes. And just the occurrence was the reason I tell this story, even if I haven't told it in a long time, is just because it's about the fiction and the nonfiction. The day I arrived with my micro crew, the two innkeepers are taking their grandmother out on a really dramatic hoist, a hoist that's used to pull someone out of bed, dangles on metal, and it goes into an ambulance. And she's alive and everything, but it's just
Like
this,
from the second floor,
no, down the stairs. And they're like, this is a bad day for us to film, it ain't happening today, But if you're here, they took mercy. They're like, you're here, the crew, the house is amazing, which it was. They had done it to the nines. It was like a mixture of the set of Rocky Horror Picture Show and an inn.
I've lived there.
Yeah. And they're like, the woman that works as our housekeeper is there. And if she's nice. You might want you could film with her. And I forgot why we didn't bring her here this morning. But, and so she was like, well, I don't know why you want to film me, but, sure. This is weird. This is really weird. I wasn't exactly prepared. Mm-hmm. And so there were these wooden banisters that were really beautiful, like a mahogany antique Victorian banister with like 80 of these curly poles. Spindles.
No,
yeah.
Someone here in this room knows what that right word.
So she started to dust them, and she had her feather duster in her pocket and all these things that she just looked kind of odd. It was very photogenic to have different objects coming from her tight jeans, And so she's like doing something, counting something, and I'm like, I said, I didn't know what else to film, so I'm like, do you mind if we film you dusting? She's like, be my guest. I said, what are you exactly counting? She's like, oh, I kind of do this as the dusting Olympics. I dust really quickly, and I see like how fast I can get to the end of the row. I'm very athletic. I was a really cool softball player as a tom girl, and this is how I kind of make this interesting for myself. It turns out she had a lot of different methods for making it interesting. And I remembered this thing I used to love about Mike Leigh films, like showing someone at work trying to make it interesting, trying to get into some sort of state of flow, some way to survive a job that you may not love, but you're the only one that's going to make it interesting. It's very existentially stark, and she continued to be that way. And then as we talked, she's like, oh, I got 2 kids, and then she somehow, in the middle of it, dropped the fact that she was like sober this is her 21st day of being sober. I'm like, oh,
that's a story.
This is interesting, right? This is like that's also high stakes. That's, in those early days, people count each day. Each day is an event in itself with a whole arc, And so there she was, doing what she could. She's like, well, if you ever want to film me, you can. This is where I live in Saugerties, And I think next week was Easter, maybe. And she's like, I'm going to make an Easter egg hunt for my kids in the yard. If you want, I was like, Easter egg hunt. I think I would like that. Yes. Could I come back? Yes. And so and then I ended up making a short film with her and her kids and her boyfriend at the time, and it was about what it's like to get clean when people are watching you, when 2 small people are watching you do it, and again, it's not your first attempt to do it, and yet the stakes are they become higher as you've gotten older and as you've have this responsibility for these other people. And that became a project that I really learned from. And then the question was posed to me through this project that became very important for filmmakers like myself, which was the Sundance Laboratory, right? The Sundance Laboratory became like the metaphor the reality of this festival seeding people. With a lot of women behind the scenes at Sundance, there was this idea, let's seed a whole bunch of film. Let's keep this 60s and 70s modality of having scrappier films and low-budget films be a possibility in the American landscape. And they're like, do you happen to have a longer script that you would, you made the short, do you have a longer script that you might want to develop? And I'm like, yeah, I do actually, yes, yeah. I had eliminated so many films. The film was a 22-minute short. The rough cut was 2 hours. I'm like, I think there's probably, there was a longer story there for sure. And I went back and we worked on a lot of the other anecdotes, and then the job was to fictionalize it, right? To say, it was very, 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 it was down to the bone of their story. It was very tied to their story. The story originated with them. It was based on events that they had withstood and succeeded at and struggled with. And certain fictional deviations, of course, either to protect certain people in the story that it was not our business to be telling their part of the story, certain ways to heighten things, and then it became a really great nonfiction fiction hybrid here in the Hudson Valley. Lots of people played themselves. People came in and were able to tune in, such as Ed was able to come up from Newburgh. And no stranger to the corridor that was this massive artery for both the craziness of bringing large amount of drugs upstate, right? The corridor to traffic drugs through our state, but also this trafficking of rehabilitation, right? That the entire uniformed services of New York City had to come up to Ellenville, to like one of the few working class rehabs. And, you know, you've got the FDNY, the NYPD, every Con Edison, you know.
So I'm sorry, so they're sending their people who need rehab, they're sending them to Ellenville? Or
other people probably know about some of the other facilities and communities that were up here at the time, but we got acquainted with Ellenville, and they allowed us to film there with, you know, it's huge issues of anonymity with people in any kind of rehabilitation community, but that there was this idea that some people that felt very much like they would like to participate, you know, could. And then there were practitioners from the community, people who had drug and alcohol counseling skills could participate in the film. You know, a lot of people brought their lived experience from this region, on both sides of it. On the side of looking at chemical dependency and how people change that script in their life, people who had withstood it and struggled with it were working on it. And so there was really a very fluid boundary between fiction and nonfiction. And social realism works that way. Social realism welcomes people. The person in New Paltz who actually dealt with people at night who had drug charges, you know, he helped me with that part of the script to make it accurate for New York State at the time, what kind of felony you would get and what might happen to you, whether you're eligible for drug court. And, you know, I thought maybe I'd cast him.
All over, all these little courtrooms.
So he gave me the accurate words, and then I was trying to cast him, and I'm like, could you do it? You do it so well. You've done it 188 times just this year alone. He's like, I'm no actor. I'm like, but you know, you have the expertise, and you really know how to tell Vera what her options are when she's sitting here shivering in this tiny, you know, handcuffed to the bench in New Paltz because she got pulled over, you know, at the fairground outside of New Paltz, you know, on Liberty Road.
Ulster County, the Ulster County Fairground.
And he really knew how to deliver those, you know, he knew how to tell her what had happened, what she was being charged with, what the options were. So again, expertise.
And Vera is Vera Farmiga, so that was
yeah. And then Vera brought her own neighbor to the film. You know, if she was here right now, she could tell the story, but her neighbor Walt came with something he had frequently given her as a gift, taxidermy deer heads.
Okay.
Beautiful, you know. And he would come across he would come across the yard. He was third generation Fort Ewan, you know, and he was fifth generation. He was just so of this land, and he thought Vera was such a, you know, plucky, awesome gal, you know, and
she just glows.
And so he would come, I think annually, across her yard and just present her with this beautiful artwork that he does, you know, and she would, and so I just said, Vera, this story is just so awesome. Do you think Walt would do that in the film, you know? And sure enough, he was so willing to trundle over with his deer head underneath the pillowcase to protect it, you know, take off the pillowcase, and then, and she was so willing to improv with him, right? She was so willing to say, you know, like he felt maybe nervous because now all of a sudden there's, you know, a crew and cameras, and I, you know, the only direction I could say is like, you know, Walt, in real life you really like Vera, and you really love presenting these to her, and she really likes you as a neighbor. Just, you know, look at Vera and just really give her the deer head, you know, and Vera will really answer, you know, and And sure enough, he's like, he started to tell her, he's like, Vera, you know, I mean, he called her by the right
name.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would look really good here. And he started to position it in her house in the film. And it was just really right on, you know? And I think the only thing he thought was queer as hell was like that we had to do it many times.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like that's the one thing that, you know, any filmmaker has to be careful of, right? Is that someone from real life is like, I just said that.
Yeah, exactly.
What part of you guys is nuts that you didn't just hear me explain? You know,
I just did it.
Exactly where I think it should go. Yeah. And then, but Vera was so great. She'd be like, "Well, let me make sure I got it. You know, Are you saying that she had all these ways to cajole him into, being able to perform the scene a couple times so we could get coverage, so we could get the standard. So in that sense, that's where the fictionalization comes, And but I pay for it either way, right? I pay with this very gnarly sense of, I wish I could switch just mid-shoot, midstream. So if I'm doing this documentary right now with the post-carceral survivors,
right?
They'll tell me, oh, I just came from my. They'll tell me I just came from my mom, and she just, did the rice and beans. She's Dominican. She just did the rice and beans just so, and I just, sat with her and blah blah blah. And all I want to do is
go back.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to create a scene where I organize it from the front, where I have a call sheet, and a shot list, and that I don't have to miss everything. That morning I know I'm going to 42 Rivington Street, and I'm going up 6 flights of stairs, and Patria's going to make Koss this traditional meal, and I'm filming it from different angles, and I say, can you bring it again? Can you serve it again? Can you take another bite? This time we're going to do a close-up. Can you tell your mom how good it is one more time? And I just want to stop everything and start filming it in this narrative way. And so
that serves you in terms of doing documentaries.
And makes me feel nuts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wrote a novel where the first draft is 50,000 words. It's a really wonderful novel, but novels have to be like 65, 75. And I'm like, okay, back to the expanding of it. But it's like,
maybe there's part for like an epilogue or.
Yeah, there is an epilogue that can be expanded. Yes, it will be done.
I know epilogues are like this place that you think all your dreams of what can't be in the body of something go in the epilogue. And they used to have a place for this again, fiercely independent. What happened to our DVDs? I don't even mean about tech, but like extras, commentary, everything gone. My mother watches, she's like, because she's a pro filmmaker, she's like outraged that there are no credits. Hideous. What happened to the idea that there could be an option, right? And that's what we were talking about before. There's been no time in American history where the engines of big industry don't, with their cogs and their bottom lines don't do their thing. And there's been no time when there hasn't been a behemoth West Coast film industry, and it does its thing, and it's made glory, and we've loved it, and the world's loved it and suffered from it, right? It's squashed other national film cultures, and it's created favorites, and it's created good things, and it's
also, as we've said since 2004, whenever we started this, and we've talked, at that point, women behind the camera just didn't exist, and therefore the kinds of female characters that have been in your films weren't put forth.
Well, they usually had to take their clothes off.
They usually had to take their clothes off. Okay, they always had to take their clothes off.
So so it's true. So if Barbara's standing there before a lot of us were, so there were women. There were women behind the camera. They were there, just silently doing their work.
Right.
And it's funny, if she had just signed them B couple, they would have all thought she was a dude, right? Or they probably did think, what I was going to say is, it's a little bit about the Uberization. Why we can have the big industry, right?
Yeah.
But why not have some space? Why do we have to have extinction? Why does there have to be supremacy, totalization? The big industry is going to do what it does. Why does it ever need to mess with us? Leave us some space, some breathing room. We have these phrases. We have these phrases like, just give us some space. And with that, we call it a niche. We call it fiercely independent. But why then invade documentary and throw $30 million and call a celebrity portrait with a $30 million budget? why put it in the same category? Why we have to say we're in the non-corporate documentary arm, maybe. Doesn't mean we have to work for nothing. Doesn't mean we can't pay people. It shouldn't be hardship. It shouldn't be for nothing. But it doesn't need to go into this level and consider us all in the same realm. Leave us some room to work at a level.
And Sundance at the beginning was that.
Absolutely.
And it's been corporatized. And maybe they have, now that Eugene Hernandez from the New York Film Festival is going to reboot Sundance, it will be back and have a real orientation to filmmakers.
But it didn't corporatize itself. What's interesting is it's the players that showed up that wanted to make bidding wars and wanted to make celebrity culture come there and be there and wanted to make certain filmmakers into celebrities.
Right.
There was a point where even though women were gaining really good traction, there was still the boy genius phenomena that they needed to pluck this one boy every couple years and give him a 5-picture deal and, pave the way for his coming of age stories and his relationship stories. And it was like, oh, well, but it didn't matter. You know what? We were doing our stuff more stealthily. It was okay. Right. You can't always have a banner. There is something called camouflage, guerrilla, Trojan horse style.
Right.
You go in quietly and you do your work, and after years, it starts to show up. I don't mean you toil without merit or, acknowledgement, but so honestly, I think many filmmakers know slow stealth is so much more conducive to a working life than celebrity pressure.
Right. And to have, the thing is, in order to have an arc of a career where you're making works that build, and then you have themes that are yours, et cetera, you have to be able to work on what you're passionate about. So that if you are suddenly successful with, say, a Lady Bird, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to make Little Women for, don't want to insult Greta Gerwig.
No, you're not. I don't think you're insulting. But
what I'm saying is, if you make Lady Bird, which is a great individual, everything about it is good, and then you decide to do another Little Women, and then you decide to do Barbie. What bothers me, this is someone, I'm sorry, my microphone. What bothers me is that the keys to the kingdom were there. She had a voice and a perspective, and I feel like I feel like women filmmakers, if you want to make Barbie, that's okay.
Well, mess it up at least.
Maybe they
Maybe
will.
Barbie has a dick, maybe.
Something,
what I mean is you got to mess it up, right? You can't just be Barbie as we know it, I don't mean that. It could be that Barbie's just a feminist. She doesn't need it. Let me rescind that. Barbie's just very,
But that was the sound bite, though. I do appreciate that.
I get myself in trouble with that stuff, but no, don't make that the sound bite. Social media. Let's dispense with it. We don't need it to make our conversation really, 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 really good, and really meaningful, and not just repasted, and re-spittled, re-drooled.
Right.
Tweeting and drooling can be similar, But the fact is,
another pull quote.
The point is but the thing is, the budgetary level, they tell you who's got a price tag and what they're worth. They tell you what actors, and one of the things.
Then you have a quote.
The only independence that I really want to try to get to be popular that I feel strongly about, or one of the many, is what's this price tag on an actor's neck, and their worth. So if you go up a certain echelon, right? If you go into a certain tier of filmmaking, let's just say you go into the 10-12 range, then you're given a list of actors that are worth 10-12, right? And so let's just say I say, I want Edward Crawford to be the guru Metro-North conductor who actually deals with all other conductors' existential problems on Metro-North.
Of which there are many.
And I, let's just say for some reason I garnered somehow there was a $7 million budget. They might say, Ed, and you're not going to be offended by this, they'll say, Oh, Edward's not on any of these lists. Edward's just a scrappy workaday, God, bless him, but he's this hardworking, working class actor in New York City. He ain't on nobody's list. Are you kidding? We could never finance this if, So the irony is the more expensive, the noose gets.
The golden handcuffs, golden handcuffs, whatever you want to call it.
And so then how do you find this tier? And this is always a plea that I always want to put out to IATSE, and this is like a thing that I've always wanted to have this discussion, like so raw with how do we do it? How do we stay in these lower tiers and have an investor want to bring out new actors? So I'm in a weird, perverse golden handcuff scenario, right? Of getting sometimes positive accolades or encouragement. Oh, you gave, your film provided a rich role for Vera. Vera was already a super talented actor. But yes, the role was something in which Vera could show a lot of her chops. Oh, your film's introduced.
Listen, you discovered Jennifer Lawrence is what they say. That reduces it to a.
So Jennifer, at a young age, got a role that she could show a lot of what she could do, right? And so it was very much a good imprint that she was able to leave on casting directors and film goers. And those aren't things, I don't make good actors. I don't do anything special to direct people to make them, they're already good.
Right.
What I could do, should these handcuffs not be so weird, right?
Right.
So I get the encouragement. Oh, you're great at giving new people a chance. But then if I say, oh,
I want to give a new person a chance.
my budget if I make this union in Portland or New York State or any state, it will cost. It will cost. Everyone just working on a really normal wage level. It will cost $5 million.
Right.
That's including a very large Teamster tab. A lot of there's a lot of expenses that never make it on screen. I mean, no one even have a relationship to screen.
Right.
But then
Fixed costs.
I will be given a list, right? Of who would be okay for $5 to $7 million. So I am really, my fierce independence is lowercase f. What independence do I really have to do what people claim is my added value, which is to give new people a chance?
Wow.
But then if I don't get that okay from a person that wants to put, a group of people that want to put up a total of 5 to 7, and then the 2.5 tier, I'm getting technical, and I know, if we were in a more production panel, this could be really discussed among many of us, but that tier, you start having much less days. So many filmmakers, I couldn't believe when I was a younger filmmaker that I was hearing 45-day shoot, 60-day shoot, 30-day shoot. I was 21-day shoot. Then I went to 24 and a half. That was amazing. And then my producing partner, Ann Rossellini, she fought so hard, and she's like, we've been at it a lot of years. We're slow movers. We're diehard tortoises. It takes us a long time to make our films.
Yeah.
Because they're not easily financeable, and many other reasons. I move slowly. And Debra and I want to shoot for 30 days. We think that would make, and we also would like 5-day weeks. And we would all, so she made it possible for us to graduate to this very empowered, healthful protocol, which is, nowhere near the health protocols of Europe.
Right.
Okay, it's still these hours of days that could break people, can break the strongest men, and really drive them into the ground, health-wise, men and women. But the fact is, she saw that there was this place for us to go that would facilitate a kind of sanity in the way we make the films, And so that's not fiercely independent. That's like That's called like fierce identification of your work needs and try to make some happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to shift and
Yes,
let people
Oh my
ask
God,
questions.
yes.
And by the way, we have microphones, so wait till the lovely people bring you a microphone so that we can get you on tape.
So, a couple things. I also want to give a plug for Upriver Studios. I don't know, Mary Stuart Masterson and Beth Davenport. It's women-owned. It's a green studio
it's
in
fantastic.
Saugerties. So, and they do wonderful stuff there. I want to go back to the prison stuff and ask you about your thinking about solutions. And I'm very. I got involved in a murder case in Potsdam, New York, with a kid named Nick Hillary. And I got Norm Siegel to come up and defend him. And what I found was in New York State, they use an algorithm for DNA processing, and there are thousands of people incarcerated because of this algorithm where they're using it incorrectly. And I got the guy who actually wrote the algorithm to come up and give testimony with legal aid. And this guy got off, but Liz Garbus made a film about it called Who Killed Garrett Phillips? Sorry, I was up late last night.
Do you want some water?
But that to me is a huge problem. And New York State uses these algorithms regularly. Sort of it feeds people into these prisons. And the second thing I think I've always said, why don't we just legalize all drugs and spend that money on rehabilitation and educating? And 80% of the prison population would be gone, right?
Well, stage one is happening, right, with marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean, stage one is happening, and we never saw. It was a long time coming. I think. The topic with carceral topic matter, top subjects, it is really infinite because we talked about the industrial side of it. I alluded to that earlier. Garbus and the Innocent Project. There is. If we were to line up all the documentary filmmakers that care about this subject, this basically, I think for the last 10 years, a film a year, an important film a year has been made on. It's just the amount of subject matter within this topic is so vast, and your interest in this area. I'm so glad.
It was really shocking to me, and especially up in Potsdam, where I guess 80% of the population works for the prison up there in Ogdensburg. It's crazy.
So how did we create a scenario where it became a town's livelihood and jobs versus the life chances of another population, say from East New York or Brownsville or the Lower East Side, or it will soon be, or Newburgh. Right. The prison population, the most recent thing I read, it's shifting to small, really the largest pull is from small towns. Easier to grab, Ferguson. Easier to grab, easier to kettle, pull, take. The work is tireless, and it's like, it would, as someone mentioned even this morning, the Marshall Project. I heard that mentioned, but or maybe that was yesterday. Maybe that was at the.
It's
at
one
the
big
shore.
blur. I'm going to take my hair that has strayed onto you.
The Marshall Project. Just the article. If people are familiar, it's a think tank with a really excellent website newsletter. Just really cutting edge information, study, articles about carceral issues, and really significantly excellent investigative journalists contribute to it, and you can get really up-to-date information about what's happening in any state. They were great during the pandemic. But if you were to go onto their site on any given day, I believe a documentary could be made, whatever subject is their article of the day, or of that month, or the study that they're releasing, or the study that some of their ancillary organizations are releasing.
And also this
past
week, there was an article about the fact that during the pandemic, they let some people out of prison, whether they were supposed to be there in a long time or not, but if they were old, there were a number of reasons that they let them out, and they discovered that the recidivism rate As long as they let them out and they had a home outside and they had a plan outside, was way less. And that's another, another tale to tell.
Yeah.
Or even to tell the tale of what it does to the prison guards and the suicide rates in New York of people of the guards and the people who were administrating prisons, because because it goes both ways.
It does, and I think that a dialogue, a film that engaged that dialogue would be amazing. I mean, who's done that film? I don't think it's been done, and I think, I was going to say one other aspect just about recidivism about the film yesterday. I just want to give this film a lot of props and this group, because it is Hudson Valley based.
Right.
I think,
what was the title of the film?
Help me out with anyone that was there. It was in the social dialogues. It was called Behind These Bars.
Okay.
And they've got a longer form. They showed the short form yesterday, but their recidivism rate of people that go through the theater program is 5%.
Right. Give people something to live.
And the national recidivism rate is 67%. But I want to make one point. I think all the guys that I'm working with on this film would love it if I made this point.
Make this point.
That in that huge statistic, a vast percentage of recidivism is technical violations. It means that somebody did something they didn't recommit a crime. They may have jumped a turnstile to get to work and didn't have the fare. They may have gotten home after curfew. They may have had alcohol when they were said they were not. That was not a condition of their parole. There were 47,000 things they could have done. Collateral consequences, things they may have. It goes on and on. And so that is enough for some parole officers, some parole supervisors to put someone back inside. It may not be for years, it could be for 60 to 90, but no matter what, it's still the taxpayer paying that extra thousands and thousands, and it's the most enormous setback to the reentrant's life, right? It sort of doubles the setback. There probably could be math done on that, meaningful math, meaningful, humane math that could be done on that.
Excellent. Do we have other questions? We do have other questions. And we'll get to as many as we can until we cut at 11:30, I think is our. So we have 20 minutes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amy Teeter. I just wanted to, have a couple things to speak to, but I actually was arrested in Newport, Rhode Island, and I was put in prison for 2 weeks. This was back in November, and I did pay attention to like what you're talking about with the recidivism, and it's just a huge money-making scam. All I saw in there was they were just trying to vaccinate people. They came out with a vaccine for HIV that they wanted to test on the prisoners. All the prisoners were on Suboxone or methadone. None of those girls, I was in there for 2 weeks. I got arrested for having my own weed and Xanax on me and crossing over the state lines. And
you
my
had
dad
your own, pardon me?
My own marijuana, which I have a card for, and Xanax, which are my own prescriptions.
Okay.
But you can't cross state lines with something like that. God forbid. So, just in case you didn't know, it's not okay.
Yeah.
So, some of those prisoners, they've been in there over and over and over. They just come in and go out. They're all on first name basis with the guards. They have no intention of like what you're describing. There's no programs where they come out. They just go out to come back in, and the whole thing is just one money-making scam. And the food that they feed these people is just terrible. They offer them nothing. I mean, I actually got a lot of reading and writing done while I was in there. It was kind of like a nice break for me, but and I did the thing that you were talking about where I kind of like made games for myself to pass the time and stay active.
And you knew you were getting out.
I didn't know. I didn't know anything. Nobody knew I was in there.
Okay.
I wasn't planning on going in there. I wasn't able to contact anybody to let them know that it was terrifying. It was very terrifying. But yeah, I never even, when I grew up, my father was a CO for 30 years at Downstate Correctional Facility. So, I was programmed in a certain way, and he was very, judgmental and racist and all the things, and so going in there, I got I learned a lot. Let's just say.
Well, thanks. Did you have a question too?
I think I did, but now I'm getting triggered because I'm now just remembering that experience.
Okay, well, that's
So,
what we're
but-
going to do. You have what we're going to do is this woman
Wait,
has
let
a
me
question,
pass
and
you
we
on
can
and
come
then-
back
But,
to you.
but your point is really, I mean, I just think.
I'm sorry that you're triggered, by the way.
No, that's okay. But I just want to say that, you know, it's pretty. I mean, I think a lot of people in this room could probably just get chills from, you know, just knowing that you were plucked off like that, and who profited from your 2 weeks there? You know, what food vendor profited? What mattress company profit? You know, I mean, the biggest. Well, I guess it would be amazing. I don't know who. Let's think of the filmmaker that could take on the prison industrial complex expose, you know, really showing, taking even a case like yours. There was a tab that was enormous for your 2 weeks. You could have even stayed at the Ritz-Carlton. You could have stayed.
Yeah.
You could have actually taken a trip somewhere and stayed in a beautiful place in Paris for the tab that the state of Rhode Island paid for your bogus detainment. So
And also, I would assume that
it's just-
that there were fines that they charged you, that it's a costly, that even that is a very costly.
Oh yeah, no, it's still costing me. I still can go back. There's no, I'm still paying for it every month.
yeah, so
It's like the
this-
hook.
yeah.
It's like a hook.
Yeah, so we have to,
on people.
Yeah, we need more work done on the subject. So anyone who knows someone who wants to do the prison industrial complex.
Jump in.
Hi. So I was really interested or pleased to hear you talk about like the fluidity between nonfiction documentary work and fiction or narrative. I'm from an acting MFA conservatory background, but I always felt very boxed in, especially as a woman, and it never actually really occurred to me that I could do something other than act. And seeing Winter's Bone in particular, it was a story where I felt like my past and actually personal experiences were most closely represented. And I hadn't really seen that story told before. So it really resonated and also gave me sort of inspiration to start making my own work in theater and film. So thank you. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about Winter's Bone and what brought you to that story and sort of that world in particular.
And just you saying your comment made me think about just that Ed's story doesn't end with not being, you know, on some list, right? He went on to make his own film, you know, out of the what's it called, the dross of exclusion and no's and other people's no's, you know.
Right.
Winter's Bone. You asked. I got carried away. You asked what brought me to that story.
Yeah, the world in that story, it's such a particular niche sort of environment and region even. I'm just
And
interested
it's
in
based
what...
on a book, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that something I neglected to say when I was talking about like working right off of real life was when I don't do that, it's off of someone's book. So, you know, off a novel. And in Winter's Bone and Leave No Trace, there were novels that were underpinning the story. And then the way I tried to apply my trade to it was looking for real life models. That's a term that's been used by other filmmakers in history. Renoir used that title for life model. People who have lived it. So it was very helpful that in Daniel Woodrell's novel, Winter's Bone, he was from the region. He was Ozarkian. But I needed to still fact check for myself. I'm an outsider. I'm an East Coast liberal coming down to a place where I don't come from, I don't know. You know, big doubts. Should I be making? Is it? You know, I will need guides. I will need fixers. I will need informants. I will need to be informed. So the layer of translating that novel to something that I was going to be able to put on to photograph was garnering a big resource of informants, and then asking if some of them will be in the film too and populate the film, put their wardrobe in the film. All 17 dogs would be in the film, you know. And so the process was, what drew me was the female heroine, right? Like, I was looking, definitely, you know, I was like, time has come to put women and girl characters in a position where they use what's between, what's in their skull a lot, and even if they might be attractive, okay, but that's not all they got. They got a lot more going, and they're going to use it all. And I also thought the setting, in his book, it was articulated super well. It was very photogenic. All a filmmaker needs to do is read a book that says, in Dickens' sense, like the cement was wet. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And in Daniel Woodrell, the trees were bare, and they creaked when the trees moved.
Yeah.
The house had a draft. You can't film a draft, but you can certainly film maybe the slits of light that come through the
doors.
Yeah, exactly. And the sounds, yeah, and yeah, I said, this is very filmable. It's suspenseful. It's not what I write. Oh my God, I don't write stories where someone needs to, luckily the crime had been committed in the past. That was a plus for the likes of me. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't do films with guns. I had taken a little vow with 7 other filmmakers. Like, Americans use guns like a crutch. I went to film school. I was like, what? I'm a little older than you all. You all are young. All your films are going to use a gun to get out of a situation?
Even just the thing about women, nudity, sex, like that.
Yeah,
that wasn't
or even, then I have to say, dirty old men in Europe, a girl and a gun,
Right.
But, but the fact is, I was always going to be like, okay, I'll put guns in my film, but they ain't going off.
Yeah.
Blue balls. They're there. But no one's getting to fire that thing off. It's a problematic object. It might be scary. So in Winter's Bone, her uncle is holding a shotgun. No one's a stranger to gun ownership. Guns are used for hunting. Guns were everywhere. In fact, guns were so available that in the holler we were shooting in, we had to vacate for one day so that the owner of the holler could lock up the 207 guns that were in the bottom of his cabin, and I'm someone who comes from a state, that's the cultural divide, Yeah. Freak show that a few Easterners come to the Ozarks and they don't handle guns, they don't know how to shoot, I don't know how to obtain a squirrel for my own dinner. You incapacitated freak.
That was a great moment of that.
And
that movie.
So, they're like, what do you know how to do?
Yeah.
By the way, on the level of day-to-day survival.
Of sadness.
Yeah. So what drew me with the story, the region, and then I get there and there's a beautiful folk singer, Meredith Sisko. She was willing to sing a song, and error by omission. The banjo had been sullied years before, made into a weapon of death, practically a death tune, right? Dueling banjos. I'm like, it's time. It paid its dues. 35 years later, the banjo comes in peace. What are you doing to this instrument? This is crazy. Pull it out of the closet and have it just be like a possible survival ditty. There's no, madmen aren't going to come out of the woods and do you harm when a banjo is played, and so there were a lot of, so maybe I thought, okay, in a tiny way, maybe as an Eastern outsider, maybe I do have also some non-knowledge that I am hungry to learn, or I could learn, or it would benefit me. There would be growth.
Well, that's what it felt like. It felt like a very particular story that was able to speak to many experiences.
Yeah. Yes, and so it gave me a lot of opportunity to work and do some visual anthropology. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? The reason the young girl was cast was because she lived in the holler. We couldn't cast her. When Jen Lawrence needed to know a couple things, little Ashley would show her how to do it, and then, we had to stop some folks. They're like, we had a generator maybe that malfunctioned. They're like, oh, don't worry about that. We'll just climb this pole and take it off of the, the kind of thing that a union, we didn't go there, but I'm just saying,
yeah.
I was like, no, you could die. Do not do that. Come back down.
We're not insured for that.
Yeah. Because the motto of all the folks in that region was, do without, make it last. make it do duct tape. Everything could be
Right.
done with duct tape. Every single thing that our crew needed to accomplish could be done potentially like that. And so in that sense, it drew me for a lot of reasons. I was very scared initially because of the outsider status and because of, and it took a lot. It took all the local people that were interested in the project deciding to befriend us, because otherwise we were city slickers coming to do exploitation. And the other thing that was very cool was that Daniel's book did shine a beautiful light on his community, right? Like, it did deal with meth, but it dealt with a girl that wanted to extricate herself from meth, right? She wanted nothing more than to see if they could live, not alongside it, but beyond it, and with it, and she had seen the toll. And the film took its time to say it was no party. There was no partying on screen. No, meth wasn't, so I think I probably have another dogma about drugs, guns and drugs. With drugs that jam up people, I don't ever want to show them in any kind of,
What?
I mean, there's a reason it's complicated, right? Karen was in Down to the Bone. She was a person that came in and did a magnificent scene from her expertise as a drug and alcohol counselor. And, so with drugs, someone said to me, why do you always put drugs in your films? Why? It's kind of icky. And I'm like, I don't choose to put them in because I want to say, let's put drugs in this film. It's like, it's an American issue. Like, we, as a culture, I remember a Mexican philosopher saying, why is America the biggest drug market? What is it about the country that has "Have a nice day" on their plastic bags, that has this level of self-medicating and this level of upsetness and existential tension that a lot of people require some way to alleviate or mollify some of the things that feel really insurmountable in this country? And it's just an endless question. But the fact is, I'm very interested in people who try to extricate themselves from a chemical dependency that is harming them, dictating the terms of their existence in some way. And right now we're about to face a really important documentary that's coming out, Laura's film, Portress's film, about Nan Golden and the way that she called out the Sacklers and OxyContin.
The beauty and the...
Bloodshed?
Bullshit, no. The beauty and...
Bloodshed, I think.
All the beauty and the bad...
Well, you'll know
Anyway,
it. You'll know it. You won't miss it.
I wish she did as a film critic, I wish she had done a different title, because it's just the kind of one that I'm like, I'll never. But it is a devastating film, as you.
I've not seen it yet. But what I mean is that this subject is complicated, like the.
Right.
But it's so interesting that they're both such out of control topics, right? The presence of guns and what it has always and is doing in our world. And the opioid, it's kind of hard to make a film about Americana that doesn't somehow get involved, not because you want to, but because it's a part of our fabric.
Yes.
And so people working at, being honest about it, but also not necessarily, I have no interest in making a film, high stakes meth ring with violence. It was about what meth was doing in 417.
Right. Right.
By the way, it was also doing it in Washington State and in Maine. The Ozarks just got that label early because it was easy to pin it on them, because it had been easy to pin things on poor communities, really easy. But so that's the gun and drug.
Oh, I love
dilemma.
that story. I never would have asked that question. That's such a fascinating story. I'm going to take one last question, and then we're going to be. Oh, I'm sorry. There's another question there too. Oh, I'm going to break the rules, and we're going to do 2 questions. We'll just keep it short, okay?
I'll keep it short.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much both for your generosity in speaking today. It's been really lovely to hear you speak. My question is, as a sort of young and up-and-coming artist and filmmaker, how do you spoke a little bit about this, both of you, but how do you straddle that line between finding the funding and finding the people that believe in your project, and also staying independent and staying true to the story that you're trying to tell. And Thelma, even you were talking about, you have a novel that's 80 pages and it needs to be 90, right? Or whatever the sorry, I'm screwing up the numbers.
No worries.
But how do you meet the expectations that the industry is requesting of you while also telling the story that you want to tell? I think is the
I
question.
have Nicole read the book right here, and she says, and I ask her like, where can I add? And she's brilliant, and she tells me like things that I can expand on in a book that already works, and I could sell the short book, but it doesn't have the mass market that maybe that bigger one has, where it will have more impact. At this point, I know that I've done the work, and therefore adding is not. I've created the world, because as a novelist, I'm a world creator, which is different.
Right.
Yeah.
From my kind of
Right.
the social realism where you, yeah,
Right.
exactly, yes. But I mean, I think, I'm just going to harken back to something that was very important to me, right, which was the short. And I think for Ed, it's been important, shorts. And, shorts, you don't have to go begging and trying to get so much funding. And, right, a really well-made short, especially because that's actually another interesting difference between the European trajectory and here. In Europe, frequently, like, the shorts have to be made with 35 millimeter. Back in the day, they had to be made. They couldn't be made scrappy, right? They had to be like this professional calling card often. And whereas we have an interesting, good maneuverability, I believe, in our shorts arena, which is, it can be a proving ground. I feel like some of the titles I've seen here, and some of the interesting run times, 6 minutes, 9 minutes, 12, 22, people are doing something extremely good for their workflow, right? They're emboldening themselves. They're finishing something. They're having a public exhibition of it. They're meeting people. They're seeing other films that really pollinate them, and they realize that that other short they were thinking of could be done maybe in this way, and so you're building your own dossier of stuff that makes you feel intrigued and answering questions that you have, finding a workflow that is functional, garnering people that will actually team up with you.
Finding your voice.
And so it's a very great building block. I mean, I don't know other ways than building blocks, really. And someone, one of these indie panel gurus from years back used to say, the least money you make your film for, at the beginning, right? You can't work in poverty forever and make it viable, but the least money you make your film for, the least people you have to please, right? That's an interesting equation. So you make small things, and Ed champions this, right? Or not champions, we both did it this way a little bit, and if you don't have to please people, then you want to make your film accessible, and you want people to enjoy it. I just meant please other kinds of powers that hold purse strings, right? You're at least developing what it is that you want to do more, and you're getting better at it, and no one's stopping you from working now.
Right. Good. Yeah. Okay. Right. Can we take our one? I want you to ask your question, and then we're going to wrap. But thank you. And your name is Chris? Am I getting this right? Ed. Okay, Ed, thank you for that.
Hi, Deborah. So I'm Cinque. We went to class together.
Yes.
We were in the same class at NYU.
Yes.
Wow.
And your film is here.
Yeah, it's here, and it's about it looks at Angola prison. So.
Wow.
But it tells the story of a day. It's not an expose, and it's not journalistic, but it's the story of one person and one day and one event that shows what mass incarceration does through one person's story. But I wanted to ask, because there was something I remember that you said to me in film school about your approach in verite. And you said, I have this way of being invisible in the room, like this gift of invisibility. And I took that, I interpreted that as you were a curious listener. And it's interesting because from then and through your work, whether it's narrative or doc or whatever, it's like someone observing and who loves what they see. And how do you identify in yourself that philosophy of like when to insert yourself as a filmmaker? Because it's inspiring how much you know who you are and what you're not, which is a strength, even your weakness, like you know what it is and then you build with it. So talk a little bit about that and about social realism, which that term missed me, but my tail started wagging when you said, I was like, social realism.
Well, let's just,
dope
we'll
because-
answer one of
yeah.
those questions.
Sorry, guys.
But then we can absolutely be right out there.
Yeah.
You know,
In a minute.
We'll liberate the space. Yeah.
The film is Angola, Do You Hear Us?
Yes. And when's it? Did it play already, or is it playing?
3:45 today.
Oh,
In
wow.
a sh-
Angola,
it's in a
do
shorts
you
block.
hear us? 3:45 today, and
Yeah.
do you know the theater?
Oh, I do
I think
not.
it might be. I mean, it might
Well,
be.
It's a
Booker Street.
shorts block.
Okay, so you can all, you
Yeah.
all have your things.
The community.
Let's- well,
That sounds familiar. Community center.
And yeah,
let's-
that would be. I know that block is pretty incredible. That block of shorts. So anyone who's looking for an excellent way to be somewhere at 3:45 and have their brain turned on, be at that little, what's it called? That beautiful programming block. But just in a nutshell, keep showing up. Even a good
That's
title.
it.
Even a great title for the block. You made me think of something, and it's so very, 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 very nice to see you, because I've seen your name, and I actually was going to call you for a different reason about a year ago. One thing I always think about is like how tired how absolutely tired and in pain my neck muscle and this muscle is after an interview, because if someone's going to tell you some things and they're willing to share some things with you, Barbara probably knows this too, I'm just nodding. I'm nodding so much because I'm trying to say with my eyes, in terms of interrupting, I try not to say, because if it's an interview that we're going to use, I don't want to wreck the audio, right? With constantly being saying, yeah. So I have to say that just like by nodding, right? And just say, I am deeply, what you just said very much interests me. I am very much, I am following you right now. You've got my full attention. I want us to continue this. And so that's, there's an earnestness, of course, when someone is finally willing, or not even finally, maybe readily willing to share something. I definitely use as much of myself to indicate I am very appreciative of this moment, and I am listening, but I have to do it without inserting myself too much, But I also get very comfortable, and I insert myself a heck of a lot. Once people know me, once they've let me visit them many times, people will, they read you too, Stray Dog, the veteran that permitted me to do a long dialogue with him in Missouri. Once he knew I was onto something, he's like, "Girl, you probably want me to flip that biscuit again, don't you?" And and he just said something, like monumental, like, "Rich men start wars, poor men fight them," and of course I'm on his face, and he's like, "But you need an insert of the biscuit." So, and I'm like, so I just meant like, clearly, I've inserted myself. He knows what some of the requirements of filmmaking. He knows what I'm after. He knows some of the things I get turned on by. So.
Is what you're pulling out from actors and in an interview, are there any similarities? Does it feel similar to you as a filmmaker when you're interviewing and when you're
I hate
directing?
to do this.
Right,
We're so
Press
gotta
for time.
pull
Okay.
out.
All right, so but pause right there, because we'll just continue it in about 45 seconds.
But thank you for the great question.
Yeah.
What a great crowd. And I want to, oh my God, Debra Granik, what?
Oh, well, thank you, Thelma.